So, Paul, it's taken us a while to get here, and we're finally going to be talking about succession planning. But why aren't anybody else speaking about it?
That's a really good question, Dave, and one we're going to try and answer. And we've been talking about it for a while now. It's a mix of things, isn't it? Some people, it just hasn't crossed their mind. They don't realise the importance of it. They don't understand the implications and the problems they're building up for themselves.
Yeah, and I think what I see when I'm chatting to business owners is the fact that a lot of people don't understand where they actually are currently, and I think that's an important topic to cover, what the current reality is for people, because that's the starting point for them to understand where they want to get to and the gap that they've got to fill.
That's absolutely right. And certainly from a legal perspective, there are default rules which apply to individuals and businesses. And very often they don't know what that situation is and are surprised when we talk about it. But it is a mix of things, and there's a lot of personal issues involved in it. Sometimes thinking about succession means confronting some difficult personal situations or individual dynamics. There could be families involved, and there are hard decisions to confront.
Yeah, and I think the thing with those sorts of decisions is that it impacts not just obviously the legal and governance standpoint, which is where your expertise lies, but it's also the commercial impact that it has on the business and the people working in the business. And the fact that people don't then think about if they're going to change the legal structure, what that means for obviously the shareholdings, but what that then means for the future growth of the business, the decisions that need to be made, and those operational and commercial challenges and opportunities that they're going to see, and then making the most of all of those things.
Yeah, we've seen that, haven't we, in our discussions? So my focus is clearly the legal principles and structures, and your starting point is commercial and operational things. But we join up in the middle with the people. Ultimately, it's all about the people and having those honest conversations, which often are put off until it's a bit too late.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, people tend to come to me and ask me questions about the financial and commercial performance of the business, and actually I stop them at that point and say, well, actually the P&L is actually just an output of other decisions that you've made throughout your business, and people being one of them, processes being the other. And then sort of the customer or guest or client experience, whatever you want to call it, and those three things are the things that I like people to focus on, to think about where their succession lies in terms of the people they're bringing into the business. Because quite often, yes, we work with small medium enterprises or family owned businesses, and logic dictates that succession is all around the next generation of the family, but that's not always the case, and actually that then has a knock on effect with some of those decisions that people might make about a new product line or a expansion plan, or even exiting the business or closing the business. And it's those sorts of things that really asking people really great questions helps bring that out for them.
Really great questions is the point, isn't it? I think often the business owner doesn't know the questions that they should be considering, and that's hopefully something we bring to the table. It's not, we don't bring answers, but we do bring the right questions for them to think about, and you need to consider it in the reality of the business. People are very busy. Life gets in the way. It's difficult to find the headspace to address these things, even if there's a will to do it.
Mm. And I think, like you say, that those questions are quite important. I think there's an old saying about people don't know what they don't know sometimes, and actually being able to go in with a series of questions or statements, or getting them to think about things a little bit differently, is really key. And I love the question that you mentioned on numerous occasions during our conversation, which is like, where are you now? And really honing in on what is the current sort of position of the business, both from a legal and governance perspective, but also from a commercial perspective as well.
Yeah, you can't move on, can you, unless you've got a good understanding of where you are at the moment. And certainly from my perspective on the legal side of things. People don't know. People don't understand the legal principles which apply to them as individuals and businesses. And why should they? And most of the time, it doesn't matter and it isn't important. But at certain key stages of their lives or their business, it can become very important. If they haven't planned and don't know where they are, that can be problematic, and we do see that a lot.
Yeah, and I think that then rolls into, as I said, the commercial performance of a business and looking at. I do exercises sometimes with people where we look at if they did nothing, what would the business look like in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? And all of a sudden, just doing that exercise then prompts a different set of questions that are more built around, well, where do we need to get to and what are we going to do between points A and B? And then the decisions are really made in line with what that vision looks like, and therefore they're able to hone in on where they are now, where they want to get to, and what that succession planning, looks like. Because, it was interesting again. Another thing we discussed, Paul, was around when you say succession planning to people, they immediately go to who's taking over the business, and that's not necessarily the right question at the right time. It might become the right question eventually, but it's more about that understanding of what's the current reality and where's the business now, where are the people now, how do they feel about the business, what's that going to look like, going forward, and how do you make the right decisions.
Yeah, what do we mean by succession is a good question, and it is a very broad issue. It's not just death and retirement and sale, although that is part of it at certain stages. It's a wider issue about the evolution of the business with or without that business owner. And the other thing about succession is it applies to all businesses. We work with startups, we work with young businesses, growing businesses, very long established businesses. There are different nuances, but effectively the principles, the issues are very common. Whether it's a sole owner, co-owners, a family business, we see the same patterns, and I think you do as well, Dave.
Yeah, funnily enough, one of the things that was running through my head as you were talking then was the whole point about people who are starting a business. The last thing that is on their mind is what is going to happen at the end of the business. But actually, it's quite important to think about that. Is the business that you're starting or running currently, is it a lifestyle business? So you're doing it, working with who you want, when you want, on what you want, or is it a business that you're looking to grow and actually exit at some point? Is it something that you're building as a family legacy, like a lot of the businesses we already work with? Because all of those three different types of businesses lend itself to a different type of succession planning and thought process. But actually, if you wind it all the way back to the beginning, if I sit in front of a startup founder and say, okay, so what's your plans for the business in 15 years? They're sort of looking at me going, well, I'm just worried about getting funding to get the next development of the business. So actually that, but it's worth that people thinking about that as early as possible, because actually what I find is that then it then probably it reduces your ability to act quickly when the need arises. Because as you mentioned earlier, Paul, there's some instances where succession planning is forced upon family businesses because of various different, health or illness in the family, which is obviously a difficult time for the family to go through. But actually, some of those things you can help get yourself through that as a business by thinking about those sorts of things earlier on.
Absolutely. A key theme, I think, of our discussions is about being proactive, trying to be ahead of the game, planning constructively, but also being prepared for the things that you don't want to happen, and being prepared rather than reactive is always better. It doesn't take some of the difficulty and trauma away, but it can certainly ease the process.
And I think, like you said earlier, there's the starting point for people is quite challenging to get their heads around, because actually what they're trying to do is think about a situation that they can't quite visualize, and hopefully through not just today's episode but the future episodes, we're able to help people just think differently about their businesses and find ways to work through that succession planning process and get themselves in a much better position than they start today with.
Yeah, I think your description of the planning process is spot on, Dave, because this isn't a one-off hit. The plan needs to be a flexible thing, a living plan, not something that you write down and put away and never think about again. Even if we've done what we think is a really good exercise with an owner managed business, that's not job done. It's a question of keep coming back and revisiting, kicking the tires. Is it still right? If there are changes in the business, family circumstances, the plan that looked great and was spot on at one point quickly becomes out of date.
Yeah, and I think I saw that in my corporate career before I started my own consultancy business, where we'd always be doing some sort of continual improvement project with the business, and we'd be doing commercial planning on a regular basis, and it'd be a rolling 3-year plan, and we'd be thinking about where we needed to get to. And it just sort of becomes second nature, I think, in larger organisations, because they're forced to, because they're, you know, producing results for shareholders, needing to show returns, needing to report to the market. But actually, those principles and that approach work equally well in any size of business, in any industry. And I think that's the key point for me, is that this isn't about necessarily reinventing the wheel for business owners. It's about them being able to find the right expertise at the right time to help them get through those questions that they need to answer.
Yeah, and if people are in the right place, the mindset to try to address this planning, a common first issue is they just don't know where to start, and that's something that we've focused on and talked about a lot, Dave.
Yeah, it is, and just on that, one of the points about trying to share what we've learned, what we get asked as individuals in our own lines of work. It's about trying to draw some of those questions or statements out in the conversations that we have, but also in order to help people find that first sort of start point, is we've pulled together an assessment, and we'll share the link as part of the podcast notes, I'm sure, that will just help people think about their businesses differently. It's very short, it's 21 questions, it's no more than 5 minutes for you to complete, but hopefully that helps you think differently about where you're at now, but also helps you think about what you might need to do next.